Dear students, welcome to this program. In today's lecture, we will discuss the Maoist movement in Nepal. The lecture will broadly try to 1. Understand the concept of Maoism, 2. Give an overview of Maoism in Nepal, 3. Analyze the emergence of the Maoist movement, and 4. See the changes as the aftermath of Peace Agreement 2006. Dear students, let us understand first what is Maoism. Before going to directly introduce Maoism, it is very important to bring into discussion two other related isms, namely Marxism and Leninism. Without these two isms, it would be extremely difficult at this level to understand Maoism. To begin with Marxism, it has been defined as the science of the laws governing the development of nature and society. Marxism was first worked out by Marx with the help of Engels more than 150 years ago. The principal parts of Marxism are 1. The philosophy of dialectical materialism and the discovery of the materialist conception of history or historical materialism. 2. Marxist political economy, which discovered the laws of motion of capitalism and its contradictions, and the doctrine of surplus value, which uncovered the source of exploitation. And 3. The theory of scientific socialism based on the doctrine of class struggle and the principles governing the tactics of class struggle of the proletariat. Leninism is Marxism in the era of imperialism and proletarian revolution. It was first developed by Lenin around the turn of the century during the course of the Russian Revolution, while fighting the opportunism of the Second International and while advancing the international communist movement through the Third International. Maoism is an extension and development of Marxism-Leninism applicable to the present era. It was developed by Mao during the course of the Chinese Revolution in the process of socialist construction, in the fight against modern revisionism, and particularly during the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Mao's contributions include 1. The theory of contradictions, the development of the theory of knowledge, and the formulation of the mass line from the masses to the masses. 2. The theory of new democracy, the formulation of the path of revolution for colonies and semi-colonies, and the formulation regarding the three instruments of the revolution: the party, People's Army, and the United Front. 3. The theory of protracted people's war and the development of the principles of military warfare, the development of the organizational principles of the proletarian party through the understanding of two-line struggle, rectification campaigns, and criticism and self-criticism. 4. The development of the political economy of socialism on the basis of the Soviet and Chinese experiences, and the dialectical understanding of the process of socialist construction as the correct handling of contradictions in the process of transition to socialism. And 5. Most importantly, the theory and practice of continuing revolution under the dictatorship of the proletariat to consolidate socialism, combat modern revisionism, and prevent restoration of capitalism and its concrete expression in the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism are thus not separate ideologies, but represent the constant growth and advancement of one and the same ideology. Therefore, being the logical extension of hitherto formulations, Maoism may be better understood as the communist doctrines of Mao Zedong as formerly practiced in China, having as a central idea permanent revolution and stressing the importance of the peasantry, small-scale industry and agricultural collectivization. Maoism in Nepal, evolution of the movement. South Asia has a strong history of armed leftist movements, and it has become the focal point of armed communist struggles in the 21st century. Both India and Nepal have been hosts to revolutionary Maoist movements for a number of years now. But the movements have grown apart in their ideological and practical orientations. Naxalbari took place not far from the India-Nepal border in West Bengal. Nepal's particular geography gives this tradition fertile ground due to the mountainous terrain that is favorable to guerrilla warfare. These factors, combined with the desperate rural conditions and disaffection for the political system in Nepal on behalf of the masses, created a fertile environment for a revolutionary movement. To examine the historical trajectory of the evolution of Maoist movement in Nepal, we will divide it into two phases, namely from 1940s to 1990s and from 1990s onwards. Phase 1, 1940s to 1990s. The Maoist movement in Nepal cannot be understood unless we look into the background of the communist movement in the kingdom. The communist movement in Nepal started in the late 1940s, inspired by the ideals of Marxism, Leninism, and by the success of communist revolution in China. The communists of Nepal called for a people's democracy. It is pertinent to mention here that the Communist Party of Nepal, CPN, formed towards the late 1940s, in its first official handout published in April 1949, declared that Nepal should strive for a people's republic following the Chinese model. If necessary, an armed struggle should be launched in order to achieve this goal. When the New Delhi Agreement to decide the future course of Nepali politics was concluded in February 1951, CPN unsuccessfully demanded the formation of a constituent assembly. In subsequent years, the CPN continued to struggle for its goals. However, it lacked adequate organizational strength to launch a movement. After the royal coup of December 1960, in which King Mahendra abrogated the parliamentary system and took all powers in his hands, the CPN split into two groups. One group, headed by Keshar Jung Rayamaji, supported the king, while the other group, headed by Tulsi Lal Amatya, decided to continue its struggle against feudal and authoritarian forces. Thus, the communists got divided into royalists and revolutionaries and contested over monarchy, parliament, constituent assembly, India, the Nepali Congress and other issues. In 1971, influenced by Maoism and the Naxalites, Charu Mazumdar group of India, some young Marxists in Jhapa, the easternmost district of Nepal, decided to launch an underground guerrilla movement in tune with the concept of protracted people's war. This came to be known as the Jhapa uprising, the first of its kind in Nepal. The Jhapa uprising was crushed by the royal government. The Jhapali group re-emerged in 1978 after considerable review of its goals and strategies as CPN Marxist-Leninist. ML was of the opinion that it was not sufficient to borrow an ideology or strategy. Objective conditions or the ground realities were also important. It was emphasized that Nepal's road to socialism would be based on socio-economic realities within the country. This group, with its strong ideological and organizational base, came to be known as Malay. Towards the end of the decade, the party leadership again entered into an ideological debate. Pushpa Lal, a strong leader of ML, said that it would be impossible to establish democracy in Nepal unless a protracted war was launched. But he believed that there was a need to unite with other forces to fight against the authoritarian regime. Mohan Bikram Singh and Nirmal Lama, while agreeing with the need for protracted war, argued that there was no need for collaboration. Yet another difference was that Pushpa Lal was in favor of the restoration of parliamentary democracy, but the other leaders were in favor of a constituent assembly. Mohan Bikram Singh and Nirmal Lama constituted a new party called the Fourth General Assembly. Their main strategy was to launch a protracted war. The present Maoist leadership comes from this Fourth General Assembly. Nirmal Lama broke from Mohan Bikram in 1984 to form a new party. Mohan Bikram Singh and Mohan Badya formed a new party, CPN Masal. Baburam Bhattarai became General Secretary of the party in 1980. Mohan Badya broke away from the main party to form CPN Masal. In 1984, Pushpa Kamal Dahal became General Secretary of the party in 1989. In 1990, various hardcore Maoist groups formed the CPN Unity Center with Pushpa Kamal Dahal as chairman. The fourth convention, Lama, CPM Masal Bhattarai and CPN Masal Pushpa were the major constituents. Towards a movement, 1990s onwards, the Unity Center was the first major attempt by hardcore Maoists to unite. This may be considered as the starting point of the Maoist movement in Nepal. The Maoists called for the formation of the Constituent Assembly. Unity Center was a revolutionary forum. It also formed a United People's Front of Nepal, UPFN, that was the political front of Unity Center. It was also joined by other factions including the Nepal Workers and Peasants Party, led by Narayan Man Bichukche Rohit, Communist Party of Nepal, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, CPN Malema or CPN MLM, headed by Krishna Das Shrestha, and people-oriented Roop Lal Vishwakarma. The Rohit group left before the 1991 elections and MLM after the elections. In the 1991 general elections, UPFN won 9 seats and emerged as the third largest party in parliament. On 10 February 1992, UPFN constituted a joint action committee which submitted an 8-point demand charter to the government. Later on, this was converted into a 14-point charter. The party also organized strikes and bandhs. The UPFN suffered from conflicts among its leaders. As a result, in 1994, UPFN splintered into 2 factions. UPFN Niranjan Govind Badya and Leelamani Pokharel and UPFN Baburam Bhattarai. In the 1994 mid-term elections, the Bhattarai faction of UPFN was not recognized by the Election Commission. Hence, it remained out of the elections. Frustrated by the decision of the Election Commission, Bhattarai decided to follow an aggressive and confrontationist path. His faction started taking action against those who had participated in elections in the Rolpa district. This brought the party in conflict with the government. In 1995, UPFN was renamed as CPN Maoist. The party began to prepare the cadres for a violent movement. On 13 February 1996, it declared its struggle against the government, which culminated into a 10-year-long insurgency. The resulting conflict claimed the lives of more than 16,000 people, leaving thousands injured. Hundreds still remain missing. Peace agreement and after. After a devastating decade-long war between Maoists and the government, an all-party people's movement took to the streets of Kathmandu in April 2006 and forced King Gyanendra to reinstate the parliament. In the following months, a 7-party coalition took control of the government, stripped the king of most of his powers, and accepted an interim constitution. Since joining the peace process in 2006, the Maoist group has split more than 4 times. One of the offshoots is the Chand-led Communist Party of Nepal, which claims to be an original Maoist party. Chand and other leaders were against joining hands with parliamentary parties in 2006 to sign the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. In May 2008, the monarchy was officially abolished and Nepal became a federal democratic republic, thanks to movements for equality from its marginalized groups such as the Madhesis. For the first time in Nepal's recent history, all segments of the population, including the Maoists, were participating in the democratic process. Every Nepali citizen felt as if they had a voice in the parliament, if not the streets. There was hope in the air. What followed was years of protracted negotiation over a new constitution. In April 2015, Nepal was hit by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake that killed over 9,000 people and injured tens of thousands of others. Using the unprecedented devastation experienced by the population as an excuse, the dominant parties in parliament subdued all opposition voices and fast-tracked a new constitution, and 2 years later held a controversial election. Having ignored opposition protests and popular grievances for years, Nepal's new leadership is now facing a major threat. A new Maoist force, fed by popular disillusionment and anger, is growing in strength. As a result, Nepal once again appears to be heading towards a national conflict. The Maoist party, led by Netra Bikram Chand Viplav, now has emerged as a challenge to the government, led by NCP chairman KP Sharma Oli and for Prachanda himself, who is considered as Prime Minister in waiting. Former Maoist cadres who were against embracing the multi-party democracy and the integration of combatants supported Chand. His party boycotted the second Constituent Assembly elections held in 2013 and the 3-tier elections held in 2017. The party also opposes the 2015 constitution. The Chand-led Maoists say that Prachanda abandoned the key agenda of the Maoist movement, and Chand claims his goal is to fulfill the remaining agenda of the Maoist revolution. After the end of the Maoist war, successive governments failed to deliver transitional justice to the victims of the conflict, and many war crimes went unpunished. Moreover, the security forces that participated in countless human rights abuses failed to reform. Furthermore, in the initial years, political parties did not take Chand or his party seriously due to its low strength and limited presence. But with the formation of a new government in 2018, it seems that the Maoist splinter group has emerged as a security challenge for Nepal. In recent months, Chand's party has increased its presence and violent activities in some parts of the country, mainly in the far western and mid-western regions, which were the heartland of the Maoist movement. Its leaders and cadres who were semi-underground are now totally underground. There are reports in local media that new party is collecting donations from businessmen, whether voluntarily or through extortion. Some Maoist cadres have been arrested with weapons that belonged to the Nepal army during the insurgency period. During the insurgency, Maoists had captured weapons from the Nepal army. It seems that the group did not turn over all its weapons during the integration process. At least some weapons were kept by leaders and cadres close to Chand. Chand and other leaders had expressed displeasure over the integration of Maoist combatants into Nepal army, which Chand termed as surrender. Out of 19,000 Maoist combatants verified by United Nations mission in Nepal, only about 6,500 were integrated into the Nepal army. The rest retired or disappeared. During the verification process of weapons and combatants, some Maoist weapons were found missing. Now, the security forces investigation shows that Chand-led Maoist party is using the same weapons. After repeated fruitless attempts to hold dialogue with Chand, on March 12, the Nepalese government officially declared his party a criminal group and banned all its activities. The ban was the clearest signal till date that Nepali polity is once again headed towards a confrontation that could potentially spiral out of control. Ominously, the Prime Minister has tried to give himself the sole authority to deploy the army, overriding the constitution. While the ban came on the back of an established pattern of violence, it still carries the risk of escalating the situation into a full-blown insurgency. In the past, similar hard-line attitudes by the political elite and brutality by the security forces helped fuel an armed rebellion. Conclusion: history seems to be repeating. On its journey of peace and stability, Nepal needs huge foreign investment to fulfill the aspirations of development and prosperity. The violent activities of Chand's Maoist party will affect the investment climate, particularly as it has targeted multinational business endeavors in the country. As a result, following the ban imposed on Chand's party, many fear a new wave of abuse will be unleashed on the group's supporters, including those who have not engaged in violent activity, further fueling the Maoist discontent. A number of his supporters have already been arrested across the country since the ban was put in place, and the security forces have been accused of torturing the detainees. As the confrontation between the banned Maoist party and the government escalates, it is possible that history will repeat itself and we will witness another wave of human rights abuses. After 3 decades of chronic political instability, Nepal has just embarked upon a journey of peace, stability, and development. The rise of a new Maoist splinter group could jeopardize that. The last thing Nepal needs after a decade-long insurgency, a tumultuous peace process, and a disastrous earthquake is a second Maoist war. The sensible option for the government would be to make an honest effort to invite such opposition groups for talks, maintain law and order, and undertake massive reforms to address the inequalities that contribute to hordes of disillusioned youth joining violent groups. Well, dear students, in today's lecture we have attempted to understand Maoism, especially in the context of the Maoist movement in Nepal, its historical trajectory, as well as the culmination of a violent movement of insurgency which ravaged the country for almost a decade. We also discussed the end of the decade-old Maoist insurgency in 2006, when a comprehensive peace agreement between Maoists and government was signed. After that, we also discussed how a splinter Maoist group under Chand is waging a new campaign of violence, and it seems as if history is repeating for Nepal. Dear students, I hope you had enjoyed the lecture, and with that, let's also hope Nepal does not plunge again into civil war. Thank you.